Shabbat Shalom. I trust that everyone is safe, warm indoors, and hopefully you have means of eventually getting out and getting to where it is that you need to go. So we have another Shabbat where we are reduced to some degree to appearing before you in this manner. That is on YouTube and on Facebook Live. Prayerfully, the weather will take a better turn for us next Shabbat, and we will have a chance for House of David to be fully assembled again. Meanwhile, in the interim, we are continuing to pray for those that have been suffering under the effects of COVID and its varieties, flus, and other ailments that have kept us apart. I'm sure many of you saw the email that went out this morning or a text message speaking about our brother Johnny coming home yesterday sick. So, Johnny, we're praying for you, have prayed for you today, and will continue to do so, that any fever would be broken, and that any symptoms would quickly disappear. So, we also I want to thank those that were able to come out this past week on Tuesday night and spend some time with Hanok Young. We had a good crowd, and we were able to bless him in a significant fashion financially, and appreciate the words that Hanok shared with us. Thank you for our time, and man, it was great to see you live and in person, actually put our arms around you and encourage you. So looking forward to doing that at full force this coming Shabbat. Be in prayer about that the Father will enable us to have that opportunity. Today we are in the Torah portion, Mishpatim, the word Mishpatim meaning judgments. And it's in this particular chapter or Torah portion that we find the actual beginning of the giving of the Torah. When you first start in chapter number 21, you're going to find various laws and decrees about servanthood, about raising your family, physical attacks, recompense for damages to properties, what happens to a thief, about righteous testimony, speaking the truth, celebrating the festivals of Pesach or Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And then we come to chapter number 24. This is the last chapter in this Torah portion, and it's one of my favorites in the book of Shemot. So let's begin with verse number 1. And I want to read through verse number 11. The word says, "And to Moshe he said, Come up to Yahweh, you and Aaron and Nadav and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall bow yourselves from a distance. But Moshe shall draw near to Yahweh by himself, and let them not draw near, nor let the people go up with him. Moshe came and related the word to the people, all the words of Yahweh and all the right rulings. And all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. And Moshe wrote down all the words of Yahweh and rose up early in the morning and built a slaughter place at the foot of the mountain and 12 standing columns for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, and they offered ascending offerings that would be alot offerings, and slaughterings of peace offerings, or zevachim offerings to Yahweh of bulls. And Moshe took half the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the slaughter place. And he took the book of the covenant, which would have been not a bound book like this, but a scroll, and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, All that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do and obey, or as we sing in House of David, Naaseh v'nishma. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, see the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you concerning all these words. And Moshe went up, also Aaron and Nadav and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the Elohim of Israel, and under his feet like a paved work of sapphire stone, and like the heavens for brightness. Yet he did not stretch out his hand against the chiefs of the children of Israel, and they saw Elohim, and they ate, and they drank. Today our title is Making Aliyah. We'll explain the word Aliyah in more detail in just a few moments. Human history is filled with stories of those who were born and initially raised in low or even desperate situations. And then they found a way to rise above it all to become something that is great, something notable. We label these stories the rags to riches stories. But it's not just the monetary aspect that should attract us. It's the human will to do something more than merely survive, but rather to overcome whatever obstacles or mindsets or cultural limits or physical challenges that we face to achieve goals, to accomplish our dreams, and to do what's not supposed to be possible. When Yah created man, he placed his greatest creation in a dream world of perfection, of beauty, and meaningful work, and he was accompanied by the divine presence. It was here, in this perfect world of the Garden of Eden, that mankind fell. That's the term that we use, the fall of man. He descended, he lowered himself by believing lies and judging merely with his eyes instead of by the word of Yah. The result of his poor decision-making was pain and sweat and frustration, hardship. He lost his innocence, and ultimately he encountered death. The Serpentine Lie, it's the same thing that we're facing now, but the Serpentine Lie then was that they would be greatly elevated to be like the Most High, that they would become Elohim, or mighty ones, as if what they had done was nothing, what they had was nothing to be desired. Remember, they were in a perfect world, in the divine presence. But the serpent deceived them into believing that that wasn't good enough. This lie led them to be, the word says, sent out. The word there is shalach, out of the garden. And then in Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 3, in verse 24, it states that Yah drove them out. The word there is garash. It means that he thrust them out. He expelled them. He cast them out. Maybe we would even say he kicked them out. Adam and Chava then were made to leave in no uncertain terms, being forced out, but not without hope of ever returning. Bereshit chapter 3, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 says that it talks about the promise of the coming one who will crush the head of the serpent. This one who does this is a deliverer. He is the redeemer. He is the restorer to the garden. So man's ultimate goal of ascension, or making Aliyah, going up, is the great Aliyah, the return to the place of his presence. Returning to having access to the tree of life. and a return to dwelling with our Creator. Am Israel has been called out of very low places, of enslaved circumstances, out of obscurity, out of rebellion, out of idolatry, and been brought to places to find the face of Yahweh, to be set apart, to be his holy nation, to be the people of Elohim. Our text today gives us some insight on this upward journey of this great invitation that was offered to 74 mere mortal men to actually have a visual encounter with Yahweh, our Elohim, the Creator. It was this opportunity that not only enables these leaders to go up to Yah, but it also elevated the nation as a whole, or at least it should have. Now let's talk about this word Aliyah. While only Moshe had previously been allowed to go up onto this mountain at Mount Sinai, and then when he went up, he was accompanied to some lower level by Yehoshua. Now Yah is given a personal invitation to Moshe, to Aaron, to Nadav, to Abihu, the two elder sons of Aaron, and then the 70 elders. So that's 74 men. And though they may approach to a place that they've never been offered this before, there is still this sense of divine tension and a required distance between them and Yah. He says in this chapter, he says, let them draw near, but don't let the people draw near themselves. In verse 1 at the end, he says, they will bow themselves from a distance. We read in, what is it? Is it Numbers chapter 10, Leviticus chapter number 10? I think it's Leviticus chapter number 10. I'm turning there quickly. Yeah, Leviticus chapter number 10. This is what Yahweh spoke, saying, by those who come near me, let me be set apart, and before all the people, let me be esteemed. So Yah maintains and requires that there be this recognition of his set apartness, even when we are afforded the opportunity to come into his presence. And many of us have encountered this amazingly sweet, powerful encounter of his presence and his power. And then sometimes we get the idea that now that we've encountered that, we have license to do the absurd or to act in his name and claim that he is speaking things that God's not a part of. And for that reason, many times revival that has been graced by the presence of Yah has run amok, run off the rails, and hit a brick wall. It's because man gets involved, and we forget the holy tension, the required distance between ourselves and Yah. Now, it has been stated about this word Aliyah that it means going up. Aliyah is rooted in the Hebrew word Allah, A-L-A-H. This is spelled with an aleph, which means the strong one, a lamed, which means control or authority, and the hey. Remember, the hey is the letter that looks like a man's got his hands in the air saying, hey, look over here, pay attention. There's something you need to see. So the strong one's authority is being revealed to us by going up. We most often think of Aliyah as those returning, referring to those who are returning to the land, especially of Jews that have been living in other countries. They make Aliyah, that is, they go home to Israel. It also references the pilgrimage of those that would go to the three feasts to be gathered at Jerusalem of Pesach or Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So they are making Aliyah. They are going up onto this mountain. Remember, there's been a fence built around this mountain at its base. Man nor beast is able to go up, but Yah is saying, break down a part of the fence or come through the fence and approach me. Come up to a certain level, but maintain the correct distance. And they are required to bow themselves, to bend with their faces to the earth, or even prostrate themselves before him. This is the same thing that you see in Bereshit or Genesis chapter 18 in verse 2, where the three messengers show up at Abraham's tent, and he runs out and he bows down and he puts his face on the ground, showing complete and total humility. And then also in Bereshit chapter 22 in verse 5, where Abraham is getting ready to go up and offer Yitzhak or Isaac, his son, and he says that he and Yitzhak will go up on the mountain and there they will worship. That word worship meaning the same thing, that is that they're going to bow down and prostrate themselves before the Most High there. The word used here is shakah. Shakah, a shin, which means to consume, a chet, which is a fence, if you will, or that which indicates that which is on the inside as opposed to that which is on the outside. And then again, the hey, look over here. So it's the consuming of the inward part of us is being talked about here. That is that we are revealing who we are by bowing down and revealing the humility that we seek to offer before him. And again, this act of worship, it's offered from a distance, rachot. And it's the idea of how can I put this? It's being separated. It's being secured from the least of us. And so we have this tension between the invitation to come and present ourselves to Yah, and then the recognition of the distance that is still to be observed by the invited. When I read this, I think about the veil in the temple at the time of Yeshua being offered. It's been often talked about how that the veil has been rent in two, and the veil that separated us from the Holy of Holies is now an open doorway, and we can come in and we can stand at the Ark of the Covenant, the very seat of the Most High, and we can crawl up in the Creator's lap and be his dear children, and he will dote on us and love on us as we sit on his knee. That's violating the distance between ourselves and him that is still required. And to be actually honest, it is indicating a wrong understanding of what veil was actually broken or torn. Let's go back in history a little bit and understand that there at the entrance in from the courtyard into the set apart place where you would find the menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense, there were two massive doors that were there, wooden oak doors. Behind those doors was a 4-inch thick veil or curtain. The curtain that was ripped from top to bottom when Yeshua gave up his spirit and died on the executioner's stake was not the veil that was in front of the Ark of the Covenant, but rather the veil that was behind those doors. Those doors would have been opened, but the veil would have been in place so that those that are in the courtyard wouldn't just stand there and gawk and looking in and seeing what they could see. In other words, the veil is what kept that place set apart. But now that we have seen Yeshua give himself in our behalf, access to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, indicated by the menorah, and access to the very bread of life, this table of showbread, the Word, the Torah, and access to a place of intercession where Yeshua stands, ever interceding for us, has been made available for us. But there is still the veil, the Ark of the Covenant. And we might say, well, then the blood of Messiah didn't do enough. Oh, yes, it did. Now, the veil that was over the ark or at the ark is one that Yeshua is given entrance into. And there he stands and presents his blood. There he stands and presents himself as the lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world. And he intercedes for us at a level that you and I cannot attain for ourselves. But we are in him. We're found in him. And he petitions the Father as only the Son can in our behalf. We should not be discouraged. We should be encouraged by this. Now, just consider this last thought on this note, that if you are given an invitation to someone's home, you arrive at their home as a guest. So if one of you were to invite Laura and I to your home, when we come in, we would make sure that we observe the protocols of your home. Some homes, when you walk in, everyone's shoes are taken off at the door, and you don't walk on the floors or the carpeting or whatever with your shoes you come in from outside on. If I see that is the protocol, then I'll remove my shoes. I'm not going to sit on your sofa and throw my feet up on your coffee table, because it's your home and not mine. You may say, make yourself at home. But even at that, there is a certain tension, certain distance. I'm not going to go digging through drawers and into cabinets and start looking for stuff. I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask for permission. I'm going to follow the proper proprieties and protocols of being a guest in someone's home in the presence of the Most High. Yah is not saying to us, come on in, make yourself at home, don't worry about it, throw your feet up on the table, just relax and have a good time. No, we're in the presence of the Most High. This is a set-apart place. This is not our house. It's his house. And when we come to his house, when we enter into his presence, we follow the protocols, the proprieties of being in his presence, or else we're not afforded that presence. So the question has been asked, why don't we experience the manifested presence of Yah the way perhaps that we have at other times in the past? And it could be that we have made ourselves just a little bit too much at home, and that we fail to recognize exactly how set apart the most set apart one is. So note then that Nadav and Abihu are here on this day, and they're experiencing the manifested presence of Yah. But it's in that chapter we referenced a while ago, Leviticus chapter number 9, and then into chapter number 10, that these two same men overstepped the boundaries of Yah's presence. Fire came out and consumed them. One has to ask the question, were they thinking of this particular day, where they were offered an opportunity that others were not given to come into the revealed presence of Yah, and they assumed that they held a position before him that would enable them then to violate and overstep his presence, and it cost them their lives. Note also that of the 74 men that went up, including Moshe, not one of them made it into the land. None of them. Each had their own means of falling at some point. Aaron is going to come down off of this mountain, and at some point he is going to construct a gold calf idol. How did he do that? Why would he do that? What this tells us is that no matter how high one ascends into the presence or what one might experience of his power, no matter how far you make Aliyah, you're still human and you still have your issues. And we still wrestle with our flesh constantly. And our flesh is constantly in rebellion against our spirit. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 16 and 17 says this, "And I say, walk in the spirit, and you shall not accomplish the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to one another, so that you do not do what you desire to do." So it's not what you gain by making Aliyah, but rather what you maintain. Say that again. It's not what you gain, it's what you maintain. Another way of putting that is, it's not how well you start, but how well you finish that's important. Now, it might be seen that these men were privileged to ascend into the presence of Yah, while the rest of the camp was left behind. Two thoughts could be offered here. One, when leaders are raised up, it is with the understanding that they will not gloat in their elevation, but rather they will turn and raise the people up who follow them to the place that they have just accomplished. Let me put it this way. To pray for your leader is to pray for yourself. When you pray for elders, when you pray for pastors and teachers, when you pray for those that lead in worship, when you leaders in offices of government throughout the land, your local officials, all the way up to the highest levels in Washington. When you pray for these people, you're praying for those who lead, and it will open a door for you to be elevated as well. If your leaders are falling down and failing, then it's also closing doors for your own advancement. So if we want the body of Messiah to be increased, to grow, to mature, to reach a higher place in Him, then we should be praying for those who lead us in these efforts, that they also will find that new place. Because point number two, someone who is leading can only take us where they've been. Moshe had been in this area. He knew how to move the people into this area. So when he went up on the mountain, he was receiving things that he in turn could come down and share with the people. If he didn't go up, neither could the people. So it's the role of a leader then to constantly forge ahead and find new levels and grow in understanding in order to advance the people. So when I'm studying, when I'm praying, when I'm trying to find the face of Yah, when I'm preparing these messages for us, it's not just so I can say, well, I had something to teach or preach or speak about. The goal that is in the back of my mind, I need to help my people grow. I need to find fresh understanding. I need new invigoration of the Spirit in order to cause my people to grow. I want the people at House of David, I want you to be among the most well-versed, the most equipped in the Word. I want to know that you know how to pray. I want you to know how to love one another and to walk together. I want you to exemplify the greatest passion for Messiah, yearning for the kingdom, love for the land and the people of Israel. These are goals that I have in mind, and you demonstrate that well. I'm very honored at the place that you, as the family at House of David, that you've accomplished. But we can do more. We can get a little further. We can grow more. And Yah will help us as we pray and continue to pray that will take place. Now, among the 74 that went up, note also that Moshe was afforded an even greater proximity to Yah than everyone else. Here again, we might see another two important truths. First, there are those whom Yah grants greater revelation to than others. That's just the way it is. Yah does not grant the same level of insight and understanding to everybody. But there are prophets and there are apostles and there are certain leaders that Yah, for whatever choice that he has made, ascertains that he is going to give unto them greater understanding of his word. Why is that so? It is understood, and I've shared this before, in some rabbinical understandings, that there are 4 heavens available very, very quickly. There's a natural heaven that we can walk outside and see. There's a second realm where messengers of darkness and light, they're engaging in warfare, if you will. Daniel chapter number 10 talks about this. There's a third level that is referenced as the level of prophecy, where one stands at the throne of Yah and hears verbatim and directly the very word of Elohim. They hear clearly. They are a prophet. They're not peeping and muttering, but they're hearing verbatim, word for word, what it is that Yah is saying. There's a fourth level that no one can reach to. That's the level of the incredible essence and overwhelming presence of Yah that is beyond our grasp and understanding. Moshe is standing at that third level, and he is hearing verbatim the very voice of the Creator. And he comes down and he's not saying to the people, I got a picture of, I think I heard something about this word. He is saying, thus says Yahweh. And then he gives clear, detailed information and instructions to Israel because of the proximity to Yah that he was afforded. Now, why was he given that? It very well could be simply that he was willing to set himself apart to that place. So we have in this first section here, Aliyah by invitation. Yah has invited these people up, but the invitation is not the same for everybody, which leads us then to the second thought on this, that those who remain at a lower level may feel that it's unfair. But the reality is this: Yah guards his presence from those he deems to be either unworthy by some means or incapable to abiding to him so closely. Let's just be honest and real. Not everyone walks at the same level. It's not casting down on anyone. That's not looking down a spiritual nose at anyone. Not everyone walks at the same level of maturity. Not everyone walks at the same level of insight. Not everyone can handle where at the level that they're walking the same insight. It's Rav Shul talked about wanting to give meat, spiritual meat, deep understanding of the word to a certain congregation, But he said, because of your immaturity, I'm still having to feed you with milk, simple truths. If you give meat to an infant child, they'll choke. They have no ability to either chew nor digest it. The same thing takes place in the spiritual realm. It's not that someone can't grow out of their situation and become mature and learn a greater depth. They can. Many of us have, and many of us need to do more, me included. So we need to develop and grow and mature so that we can get a higher place in Him. All right, so that was an idea about Aliyah, or making ascension or going up, because we've been invited. Yah is still calling His people to a higher place. We are not left to our current devices. What we're experiencing and where we're walking right now is not all that there is. I believe there is more. I believe that Yah will reveal more to us. I believe that the Father has more for us to understand. Certainly in the days ahead, we're going to need greater understanding of what's going on in the earth. But we're going to have to get there. We can't just assume, well, He'll just dump it on us when we need it. We need to become more discerning. That's point 2. Let's talk about Aliyah through worship. Making ascension, going up through the act of worship. Now, we read further in this chapter where Moshe builds an altar in which he is going to offer korbanot, various types of offerings. Around, evidently, this altar, he erects 7 standing columns, probably columns of stones. These columns represent each of the 12 tribes of Israel. We're told that in verse number 4, 12 standing columns for the 12 tribes of Israel. So each tribe is individually represented around this particular altar. Why is that? Is it just a noble symbolism here? Certainly there is a particular purpose. Let's keep in mind that the 12 tribes came from Yaakov, but they came through 4 different mothers. And these 4 women, the 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah, though they would have been similar perhaps in appearance, probably the same hair color and eye color, skin tone type things, very likely. They were really unique and different, and they had greatly different personalities. The sons that were born of Bilhah and Zilpah, we're not told what nationality or ethnicity or color or background that these 2 women had. It could be that they looked quite a bit different than the 2 sisters. Where that is taking us is then that the 12 brothers did not all look exactly alike. That's very possible. That some were dark-skinned, some were light-skinned, some were straight-haired, some were curly-haired. We don't know. But there is the potential, because of the variety of mothers, that there was a variety of appearances. And certainly with a variety of mothers, then there's a variety of perspectives and understandings, different genes, different DNA. Things have changed. The tribes of Israel represent a variety of people. And our individual minds, it's very easy to get locked in to somehow expecting that all of Israel is going to be similar to ourselves. But we should understand that it is a multicultural group of people, that it is a multicolored group of people, a multi-ethnic group of people, a multi-languaged group of people. When the kingdom comes, we're coming from the four corners of the earth. There will be no place for any rejection, any bigotry, any racism, any of that negative garbage in the kingdom, because we're going to have to be accepting and realizing that people uniquely made and greatly different than ourselves are going to be family with us. Kind of reminds you of the movie from a few decades back, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And it's that understanding then that Yah loves the world and all that are in it. And he's wanting to include all of us. These 12 columns stand there talking about the different qualities and perspectives and gifts of all of the different tribes, and yet they are all combined together to make a single nation. A nation that is full and complete. I labored this point because there is a spirit of division that is at work in the earth. The spirit of division is seeking to divide us at every possible turn or in every possible variety. They can't divide us across political lines. Then it's about financial class lines, whether you are the 1% or the 99%. Where did that come from? Whether you're one race or another race, whether you belong to one country or to another country, whether you are a born here or an immigrant or a refugee or one who's stolen across the border. The spirit that is at work, the spirit of the anti-Messiah that is at work in the earth, is seeking to divide us and separate us. It's caused us to hide our faces and keep our identities from one another to where we can't see who we are for almost 2 years now. It is sought to isolate us in our homes and quarantine us and leaving us only to ourselves. Unfortunately, as we are here today, we can't gather together to worship. They don't want us to come to a location, to an office, or to a job site to do our work. They would prefer that we work from home because it's safer. All of this is about dividing and isolating us. But the Spirit of Yah is reaching and getting and gathering and pulling together and assembling and moving together and causing family to become interacting. When we take fear out of the equation, then we're not afraid to look at one another. We're not afraid to touch one another. And Yah is going to need to help us to go further in this. In our hearts, we need to build these 12 columns and signify to the Master, we stand with our family. We stand with all that belong to you. They may be greatly different than me and myself. They may be greatly different than anything I've been exposed to. But if they belong to you, Yah, and you're accepting of them, then I'm going to accept them. And I'm not going to criticize them, and I'm not going to cut them off. Then it says in this act of worship that it was the young men who were called in the act of leading worship. It was the young men who operated in priestly function to come and present olot, ascending offerings, offerings of take all of us, the whole burnt offering. We yield all of our lives to you. Raise up the entire nation, O Yah. And then Zevakim offerings, Zevakim Shelamim, offerings of peace and thanksgiving. Offerings, it says that we are at one with the Most High. Now, who were these young men and what priestly function were they operating at? What priestly order were they from? Who's the high priest here? Moshe is acting as the high priest at this moment. And these young men then would be the firstborn sons of their families, evidently chosen by the tribal leadership. These 12 young men would have approached and acted in a family priest function, the priesthood of the firstborn. This is, you may call it the Melchizedek or Melchizedek priesthood, because the Levitical priesthood has not yet been instituted. So all Israel is indeed family by blood, by lineage, and by adoption. These are those then that are acting in behalf of all of the family of Israel. Now, I want to pause here about the youth. Historically, it's been the youth, at least in the nation of America, it has been the youth that have paved the way toward revival. Mario Murillo recently spoke about this, and he's written about this. And I heard him recently talking about the summer of love. Some of you are old enough to remember the summer of love. I remember it. I was a child, but I remember it being referenced. For those that are too young to remember the summer of love, it took place over the summer months of 1967. Man, it's hard to believe that was what, 40, 50, oh my, about 55 years ago? Oh my goodness. Close to 55 years ago. During the summer of love in 1967, over 100,000 young people, they moved toward San Francisco. They thumbed, they drove, they found a way to get to San Francisco, and they were hanging out in a neighborhood known in that area called Haight-Ashbury. A lot of classic 1960s music was birthed out of that. I think the Grateful Dead as a band was a leading element in that, as were others. That was the birth of the psychedelic music rage that went on at the time. And they spent the summer singing and dancing. And maybe you heard the song many years ago, "Are You Going to San Francisco?" Put a flower in your hair. They had flower lays around their necks and in their hair. And they sang about the ideals of ending the war in Vietnam, anti-war, anti-government, anti-morals, at least the morals of the recent decades. They sang about free love, about drugs and rock and roll. This counterculture effort of flowers and long hair and hippie-style clothes and walking around with peace signs being lifted up was short-lived, though. Within 1 year of this summer of love, Martin Luther King was assassinated in April of 1968. Robert Kennedy, that many of these young people were hoping to be the next president of the United States, was assassinated a few months later in June of 1968. It was 1968 in January that saw in Vietnam the Tet Offensive, where the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong partnered together and launched this offensive, catching the American troops by surprise. And we started one of the bloodiest offenses of the entire war, and the Vietnam War escalated then into much, much more carnage until we finally got out in the mid-70s. So everything that they sang about, everything that they believed in was falling apart. These disillusioned young people started seeing their idols dying. After Woodstock came and was over, Jimi Hendrix, that they idolized, He died by an overdose in 1970. 16 days later, Janis Joplin died. Again, thought by an overdose. And they saw that they were not invincible. Two idols that they looked to, 27 years of age, were now dead. Youth does not go on forever. And they were seeing that free love was not free from consequences. They were learning that drugs could kill you. And as much as they protested and held up their peace signs, that peace was not available to them. What they were learning is hedonism, the ideology that says do whatever you want to and I'll do whatever I want to. We just won't bother one another. That's not utopia. It doesn't work. Mario Murillo then notes that out of this brokenness, that there was the birth of what was called the Jesus people or the Jesus movement. And I'm old enough that I remember those days. Thousands and thousands of teens and 20-somethings started finding hope and life in the very places that they had rebelled against. Some, they were turning back to the book, to the word, and revival was breaking out in churches. Somewhere around 1970, I don't remember the exact year, I remember the hippie revival that took place in the Martinsville Church of God. I remember as a child turning around and seeing that sitting on the back rows were young people. We would call them hippies in their dress and their hairstyles, and they came in barefooted. But while the preaching was going on, they were leaning forward in the pews and they were whispering back and forth to themselves about what they were hearing. When the preaching was over and the music began to play, they would look at one another, and one by one, they'd get up off of those pews in the back of the church. A few of them would walk out the back door, but many of them walked down to the center of the church, and without knowing what to do, knelt at an altar, started becoming broken over their sinful lifestyles. You have to understand that that particular congregation was what we call a holiness Pentecostal denomination. There was a lot of things that we just simply didn't do. And those people could have sat back on their pews and folded their arms and said, I'll not get involved with those dirty young people. But they didn't do that. I'll never forget how that the men and the women of that church rushed from their seats and knelt down beside those young folks and began to weep and pray over them. And their lives was changed. It didn't take long until the choir loft in that little local church was filled wall to wall, somewhere around probably 40 to 50 young 20-something people singing to the top of their lungs, their faces looking toward the ceiling and glowing like light bulbs. That was a real and powerful revival. Something happened. You say, well, that's all church religion stuff, and we're maybe we're not there anymore, but it's still available to us. It's still the youth that move, that have a tender heart, that are willing to hear when they become disillusioned, when all that they're being told is everything that they need, when the lies that they have believed bottom out and they got nowhere else to look. They will look for that which is secure. That's where you and I need to be standing like columns of stones, resolute, firmly grounded, exuding the joy and the love and the shalom of our Yah, and having a heart for his word and a willingness to love them into the kingdom. Right now, if you start looking for worship on YouTube and the music, you're going to find there's a lot of young people writing new songs and standing as a young choir together in a room and passionately lifting their faces toward heaven. You may not agree with all of their dress and all of their mannerisms. Maybe their theology is not altogether everything you would agree with. But look at the heart. Yah is raising up the youth again, young folks, to lead us passionately again into his presence. Don't measure yourself against them. Don't judge them. Help them, lead them, guard them, guide them in further. And let them ignite a passion in our own hearts. So I believe that Yah is raising up a youth army to lead us in worship with a hunger and a passion that we hadn't seen in years. Be encouraged, everything's not lost. Finally, today, I want to talk to you about making Aliyah through covenant. It says that they brought Olot and Zavakim before Yah. And as these offerings were presented, then the blood that was collected, they would have held basins and collected the blood as it spilled from the animals that were being offered. Half was used to pour out against the altar and set the altar apart. The other half was used to sprinkle the scroll. Moshe stood and he read the covenant. And the response to the covenant is found in verses 3 and in verse 7. Naseh vanishma. We will do and we will hear. We put our doing in front of our hearing. Before we understand, before we gain all the knowledge about what's being said, even before we understand what's being said to us, we give a consent. We will do. And it is through the doing that we gain understanding. Excuse me. And so here, not only is the blood placed in on the scroll of the book, setting the words apart, but then Moshe, for one of the very few times in the word, sprinkles blood upon the people. Most often, blood is not placed on people. It's placed on the altar or the horns of the altar, or it's setting part of the elements of the tabernacle. But here is one of at least 3 times that I found that blood is placed on a human being. The other 2 times is when blood is placed upon a Levite priest as he has been inaugurated, such as Aaron and his sons. They're not only anointed with oil, but blood is put upon the right earlobe, the thumb, and their great toe. Also, when one is a Metzora, one has had Sarat, or what we read is translated leprosy, when they have been found to be clean and they're being cleansed, part of the ritual of them being set apart and cleansed, then again, is blood in the same manner. That is, they're being inaugurated like a priest into a new function. And so the blood that is placed on the priest is inaugurating them. It is setting them apart. And the blood that is being put on the Metzora is that he is being consecrated and cleansed and restored. So blood speaks of us being inaugurated, consecrated, cleansed, and restoration. We still need those 4 things. We need the blood of Messiah to induct us into his kingdom, into a kingdom mindset, to consecrate us toward that goal, that we would be set apart to it. Remember, Yah says, I must be seen as set apart by those that approach me. And then thirdly, we need to be cleansed. Obvious. Yah, cleanse us from all of our unrighteousness. We need to be restored. Yah, bring us back. Restore us back to the place that we need to be. Let us remember our first love, as the book of Revelation speaks to the church or the congregation, the assembly at Ephesus, that we remember from where we've fallen and seek to be restored to that. There's only one response to the blood covenant. Father, we will do and we will hear. Naaseh v'nishma. Now, there's something interesting here, and I want you to, if you have your scriptures, go with me, if you will. And let's look at the book of Numbers, the Midbar, chapter number 28. Let's read the first 6 verses. Numbers chapter 28, first 6 verses. Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Command the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, Take heed to bring my offering, my food from my offerings, made by fire, as a sweet fragrance to me at their appointed time. Excuse me. And you shall say to them, This is the offering made by fire, which you bring to Yahweh, 2 male lambs, a year old, perfect ones, daily, every day, even on Shabbat, even on Yom Kippur, daily, a continual, or a tamid is the word that is used here, a tamid or continual ascending offering. So the daily tamid is an olot. It is an elevation offering. That is, it's an offering that offers up all of us. We're elevating ourselves, and in doing so, we're elevating the nation. Continue. The one lamb you prepare in the morning, the other lamb you prepare between the evenings, with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with 1/4 of a hin of pressed oil. Verse 6, a continual or a tamid ascending offering, which was offered at Mount Sinai for a sweet fragrance, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. This is the Torah making commentary on the Torah. This verse 6, says to us then that what we're reading about in chapter 24 of Exodus or Shemot, that the offering, the olot offerings that were offered there, that offering is to be replicated daily. And the Levitical priesthood established, they made one offering at 9 a.m. in the morning offering. And what you will find referenced several times in Scripture, the time of the evening sacrifice, when Eliyahu or Elijah the prophet offered on his altar at Mount Carmel, the offering that was answered by fire. That took place at the time of the evening sacrifice or offering, the daily tamid in that afternoon. That took place at 3 p.m. Yeshua gave up his life and died at the time of the evening offering, the daily tamid, at 3 in the afternoon. He went to the tree at 9 a.m. and died at 3 p.m. In other words, he gave himself as an olot, an ascending offering in our behalf. So the daily tamid is based on, again, what took place here in Exodus chapter 24. It's a national offering on a daily basis that says that Am Israel agrees twice a day, we will hear and we will do. We do what we know, the word says, even before we understand it. Even if we don't understand it, we're still going to obey. So when Yeshua died during the time of the daily Tamid, he was atoning for the fact that you and I have failed to do and failed to hear. He covers those sins for us. If we go to the book of Vayikra, Leviticus chapter number 1, 3 times in verse 9, in verse 13, and in verse 17, in regards to the different kinds of animals that can be offered up as an olot offering, an ascending offering. It says that the olot is a ishe riach nochiach lach Yahweh. What does that mean? An offering of fire, a pleasing odor to Yahweh. In chapter 28 that we just read, it says in verse number 2 that it is an offering made by fire. It uses the same verbiage here, the same wording. Again, it is an ishe riach nochiach, or nochiach, if you will. In the Orthodox Jewish Bible, in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, in verse number 2, it says this, as also Mashiach, that is Yeshua, had ahava, or love for us, and gave himself up on behalf of us as a korban, an offering, and a zavak, a peace offering, to Hashem for a riach hanochiach, that is a pleasant aroma. In other words, he is tying together in the book of Ephesians what Yeshua did for us and the daily Tamid offerings. We're going up, making Aliyah through covenant. This covenant that is ours through the blood of Messiah. When Shabbat comes and my family has the meal, we begin this meal with the breaking of the bread, the acknowledgement that Yeshua is the bread of life for us. And we lift up the cup. And I look at the redness of the wine, and I acknowledge that we have this return to the Father through covenant. A covenant that was made for us through the red blood of Messiah Yeshua. And I give thanks for the shed blood of Messiah by which we are enabled to come home. The only reason we have this return to Shabbat is because of what Yeshua has done for us. We were the ones cut off. We were the ones divorced. We were the ones scattered the world over. We were the ones that the prophet said would even lose understanding of our identity. But Yeshua is the one that is regathering us. And he's regathering us and restoring us to the covenant that is not chiseled in stone, but now is inscribed upon our hearts. That doesn't mean that it's a fluffy, feel-good, fuzzy, warm thing. It means it is the word. This covenant is becoming a very integral, inward part of us, to where it becomes a very part of our inclination, that it is our inclination. Now be aware of this. At some point in the near future, we are going to see a reestablishment of the temple in Jerusalem. Now, how quick that's going to be, I can't tell you in a date. Relda and I have been talking about this. We're going to see. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 11 and 12, it speaks about the little horn. This is this yet unknown world leader of some variety or sort. It says in verse 11 and 12 that this one is going to cause the daily Tamid to cease. That tells me that the temple is going to be rebuilt, and that the Levitical priesthood is going to be established again to a place they're going to be offering this daily Tamid again. I don't know how long they're going to be able to do this before this one or this entity, however it appears to us, is going to mandate and decree that it be stopped. In Daniel chapter 9 in verse 27, it says, "And in the middle of the week, he shall put an end to slaughtering and meal offering." So whatever offerings that they're going to be making, it's not going to last but so long before this power, this ability in the earth is going to put a stop to it. What I'm trying to gather from that for us today, and the final thought here, is that it is the spirit of anti-Messiah, that spirit that seeks to war against Yeshua, his kingdom, and his people, that will seek to prevent us from our covenant. Those offerings that are be announced, that will be announcing to the world and into the realm of the spirit, Naaseh v'nishma. They're going to seek to put a stop to that. Our adversary does not want you and I to hold to this word and to confess and declare that we have it by covenant, that we walk by covenant, that we're going to make ascension by covenant. The covenant promises that we're going to return to the land and go up to Jerusalem. This covenant promises us that though the body die, the greatest as Aliyah ever known, the resurrection is going to cause us to come up out of the ground and we're going to live forever. Our adversary does not want you and I to be focused on this. But in the very face of that, I declare before you, Naaseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. And Father, restore us to the power of the blood that is in your covenant. The power of life, the power of healing, the power of restoration, the power of deliverance, the power of hope, the power of overcoming darkness with light. May it be so, and may it be so in our day. Let's make Aliyah, purposing in our hearts that we're going to go up. We're not going to remain at whatever status or level that we're at currently, but we're going to grow. And we're going to be at a higher place. House of David family, I'm looking to growing with you, becoming part of a movement that is upward with you. I look forward to seeing your eyes brightened, your hope increased. Incredible events and happenings taking place because we're praying. For those that are part of the stream of prayer, thank you for praying. Don't stop praying now. Momentum is being built through your prayers. And the Father is hearing us. Things are taking place. People are getting healed. People are recovering from their illnesses. Needs are being met. Lives are going to be changed. When you pray, expect that these prayers are going to be answered. And know that Yah is desiring us to seek him. He's not answering our prayers because of the volume of our prayers, how many of us are praying, or how loud we're praying. He's answering us because we're seeking him. We're coming before him and doing so consistently. So I applaud my wife for desiring to put this together. Joyce and helping us to keep the prayer requests coming in. Thank you for sending in your prayer requests. Thank you for sending in your praise reports. Keep us updated as to what's going on when we try to share that on a daily basis and give you an update. If you're not participating yet and you want to, let us know. And if we need to double up a time slot, that's fine. We want people to pray. We love you, and man, we are looking forward to seeing you again next week. For those that join us from outside the Gloucester area and community, thank you for being a part of this today. Contact us. We'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to growing with you as well. Will you sing the Shema with me? Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuto, Le'alam Vayed. And let me reach behind me here. And where you receive the blessing of the name of our great Yah. Yivarakaka Yahweh, Vayishmareka, Yahweh Yahweh panav ileka, Vikuneka, Isa Yahweh panav ileka, V'yasim leka Shalom. And may Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and be gracious, favorable to you. May Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you, that he may grant unto you. Shalom. Shavua Tov, shalom, shalom. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, shalom again.